are listening and actually absorbing the feelings that I'm feeling right now as well. Because actually doing this work for the amount of years that I've done it and still doing, it means a lot hearing this from, once again, leaders in our community. Okay, these are once elected persons, um, to actually be active in making changes in people's lives. CPS, the decisions that are made doesn't just affect the child. It doesn't just affect the parent. It affects the aunts, the uncles, the cousins, the grandchildren. It affects the full lineage of the family. And every time I would go into court to even make a recommendation, I feel like that weight was on my shoulders. And I always imagine, what does it feel like to be a judge that has that type of weight and responsibility to make that decision?
Love it, man.
25 lighters on my dresser, yes sir. I got to get paid.
Bit that it won't be a little hit. Go read a book, you illiterate son of a bitch. Step up your vocab. Don't be surprised.
Patience to these false accusations. They faking the shaking, cause the money you're making. Bricks some money on the dresser. Drive a compressor. Top notch. Get the most.
It's probably different for every person, but it was something on the CPS cases and in the juvenile cases where I was constantly thinking about it. And sometimes, on a Sunday afternoon at 3:00, I would go, wait a minute. Now I know. I think we could do this, which I probably shouldn't, probably figure out a way to cut it off. But, it is something that hopefully you do take very seriously, and that you do, Judge, when you were saying that you blew up and you shouldn't have, I was thinking, yeah, but you should have been outraged. Maybe you shouldn't have shown it, but it would be disturbing if that had not outraged you and made you, there are some people, judges, I think, who might not have even figured out that the agency was basically giving him the finger. I mean, there are some who would go, oh, okay, I understand. You didn't have car seats. Okay. All right. Well, I guess, and you figured out exactly what they were doing. Because you thought about it. So, and look, I had to talk a colleague out of leaving the judiciary because this excellent judge, against the recommendations of CPS, placed a kid with grandparents in a mobile home, and as a toddler, the child actually shot himself and died. Wow. And I told the judge, first of all, I would have done the exact same thing. The reasons that CPS didn't want to place had nothing to do with anything related to guns. They had done a home study, and that wasn't an issue. The child was with family who had no nothing in this family's background suggested that this was an issue. Otherwise, I know this person would not have placed the kid there. But, and bottom line, it was done by a third party, not by the judge. But, that can be a devastating thing. I mean, this is a judge who I have so much respect for. But you do make decisions where statistically some bad things are going to happen. Mm-hmm. I had a case where I'll always remember it, because it really informed the way I came to think about older kids in CPS care and kind of maybe flipping some of the presumptions of where they should live. I had a kid who he wanted to go home. Mom was still testing positive for cocaine and marijuana. But the kid made it really clear that he would rather live on the streets than in a foster home. And I cut a deal, and CPS was not going to place him back there. And he said, I want to be with my mom. And so with his ad litem and the court reporter, we had a talk in chambers. And I said, look, you're old enough to protect yourself. If you go to school every day and call your attorney once a week, I will protect you from CPS. And this kid went home, went to school every day, and never got hurt. And my regret is that I didn't do stuff like that earlier and start looking into, safety isn't just this temporal thing or best interest isn't just locked into right now. It's necessarily about the future. And, there are a lot of chances people don't take just because we assume that if something's been done a certain way, there must be a good reason for it. That
was my way of the culture of CPS. I remember leaving CPS and going to CASA or Child Advocates. And I remember my supervisor at the time, Kelly, I went in and I was like, okay, yeah, we're going to a termination. She was like, why? Because the parents didn't do services. But why was that the first thing you just thought it was termination? And it was like, that's how I was told to go for it.
Right, exactly.
Even though
it checks all the boxes. Come on.
That's exactly what it was. I remember when I was at CPS, and once again, I wasn't perfect. I made some mistakes. Most of my mistakes came on like typos in the court report, but nothing major than that. But it was to the point where I used to call, especially fathers, I used to call them all, and I'm like, hey, you need to do this. I used to go that extra step. And when you didn't do that extra step, I'm like, okay, I'm just going to talk to your attorney. Like, I'm coming in for full termination, and this is X, Y, and Z. And it was just the focus on the checking. And I was trained to check the boxes.
Yeah.
And I tell one story. I want to hear more from y'all, but I have to share this with you all. I tell one story that's gotten pretty popular on social media. I call the kid's name Jesse. Okay, that's his name. All right. And I seen this kid. He came into care because his mother was panhandling, and he was in a school. He was like 15, 16 in the 7th grade behind it. Just a lot of things. He was smoking. He was drinking, white kid that just had a rough life. Okay. And I remember placing them in one of my favorite Archdiocese. I would say them loud and proud, but it was Kids Harbor. Like, I worked with a lot of residential treatment centers, but Kids Harbor had a certain touch with many of my kids. And he started to do well there. I have a black boy right here that I write everything down. I give little classes to people, and I tell them about the levels of care. When those levels of care, he did so well, he got bumped up into like the 10th grade. He was in Alvin. I mean, started excelling everywhere. But when that level of care dropped, it's better you do. He had to move. He had to move to a different placement on the north side of Houston. It was a foster home, and foster mother was, hi, hello, welcome. This is my side of the house, and this is the kid side of the house. This is my family side of the house. This is the boy side of the house.
Wow.
Red flag 1 and 2 for me right there. And I'm like, okay. And him, he used to live literally living on the street, sleeping on sidewalks. Okay. So he's just happy to be anywhere. He's not smoking, he's not drinking. But she showed me her side of the house, beautiful, luxury furniture, high-end appliances. I'm like, okay, this is nice. Then we went to, she showed me the boys' kitchen, because she had nothing but boys, teenage boys. And their kitchen was in the garage. Very unkept, dirty, dusty, cobwebs. And I'm like, okay, show me their bedroom. Their bedrooms smell like urine and bleach, strongly. It was 5 boys in there already, teenagers, and it was 3 bunk beds. So you have 6 boys, the size of this studio right here, sleeping on top of each other. The drawers where they kept their clothes didn't have a back to it. Everything's falling apart. I'm like boiling. I'm like, what is this? And I'm kind of telling them, like, hey, I'm talking to them a little bit. I'm going to be back for you. He's like, no, we're okay. And she tell me, I let the boys do what they want to do. I work with you caseworkers all the time. I know how busy y'all are, blah, blah, blah. Hey, just make sure to keep his level of care up, make sure you guys medication. And if you miss a visit, I'll cover for you. This is on a Friday evening. This is maybe 3:00. And I'm like, I see my kids. As I remember saying, I see my kids. You don't have to worry about that. I'm going to be back, blah, blah, blah. I come back. I'm about to tell my supervisor, we about to get him out. I got to find him another placement. I got to come get him. My supervisor say, put the paperwork in and go home.
You're kidding.
Dead serious. That was the day I knew I was quitting state.
So let me, real quick, just so listeners understand, you mentioned that one of the things that was said was you were, keep his level of care up. Just for people who aren't familiar with the CPS stuff, explain that and why it's important.
Okay.
And what it meant.
So I wish I had my pointer here. So we have basic, moderate, specialized, and intense. I believe they added another one since I was a caseworker. So there's levels of care. And these how these placements are also paid, okay? These are also how these children can stay, like what placements are able to care for these children. Now, basic is what we can consider basic normal children, normal behaviors, relationships, maybe not cursing, drinking, none of that things of that nature, doing well in school, blah, 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 blah. Moderate, they may have a little bit older, they may be cursing, they may be a little bit, maybe not violent towards anyone else, or maybe violent towards other kids. So that's a little bit more pay scale and can't take a certain home. Also, when you go above, I believe, basic or I know it's above basic, but I think moderate and specialized, you cannot be adopted as well. So, and when you go to specialized, it's harder to find these kids too. I had a whole map too, because placements get further and further out as well. But we don't have enough time for that. I'm going to do that on a different episode. But these placements get paid more and more and more. I'm tossing out numbers here. I don't have them in front of me. So let's say a placement get paid $250 a week for a moderate child. Okay. That's just a number. Let me just say $200 a week per child. So she had 6 children in her home, and she want to make sure that they're all moderate to specialized. And you could be $200 for a moderate and maybe $350 for a specialized. That's per week they're getting paid. Multiply that times 6. So if you have all moderate children, that's $1,200 a week. Multiply that times 4, that's $4,800 you're getting paid monthly. Why the hell these kids have, and at that time, they were still getting clothing vouchers, they were still getting a lot of other benefits. And unfortunately, you have some foster parents that abuse that system, and it hurts the kid. Like, these things are made for the kids, not for the caregiver. That's the biggest thing I used to say. And this is when I was maybe a year and a half in as a caseworker. And when I came back in, and she knew the game. She knew to say, hey, you ain't got to come visit the kids. You don't have to do this. I'll cover your back. So I know other caseworkers are allowing this to happen.
Sure. Well, and the moral of the story, I guess, is if you're going to be involved in human trafficking, make sure that your client is the state.
Wow.
Well,
Can you all hear me? This is Frank. I think my video is stopped. Can you all still hear my microphone?
Yes.
I because I was in a family law court, I also heard divorces. And about this time, I had a really messy divorce where the couple had made a lot of money. And one of the things they were arguing over, they ran several foster homes. And there were the group homes like you described. But they didn't have just one. They had like 3 or 4, and I don't know how they did it because they weren't supposed to, but they were making a lot of money. And I imagine it's kind of what you just described, basically. And when I would interview kids, I heard frequently they'd say, well, the kids that live there, the children of the foster parents, they get better clothes, they get this, they have, actually in one place, they actually got better food. But in any event, but on the other hand, there are some foster parents who I think are saints, and they were not for the money. God bless them. But unfortunately, I think CPS needs to be a little more aggressive about some of these homes.
That placement was shut.
Was it shut down?
And I can say it wasn't shut down then. Me and my supervisor, we got into quite a bit of a professional back and forth, and basically like, hey. And I was struggling. I was sleeping on an air mattress my first 6 months when I was as a CPS caseworker. Like 2009 was a recession. I came into class with 80 other caseworkers, and it was rough, and had to deal with a lot. It was a lot of stress, and we're going to talk about that on a different episode of the caseworkers. But when I looked, I was like, you don't care about the kids. And as I said, you really don't give a damn about this kid at all. And I was like, I felt responsible because I've seen where he came from. And a few months, maybe a month or two, kid, it was one of those days where kids got out of school. Well, I think school was out, and when school is out, that's the best time for caseworkers to go visit their kids. So I'm like, perfect. I'm gonna go to this side of town. I'm gonna visit all my kids here, and I call the same foster parent. I'm like, hey, I'm here to see Jesse. She was like, Jesse's at school. I'm like, really? How? Okay, well, no problem. I went by the school. The custodians, they're like, school is closed. What are you talking about? I'm like, okay. I call her back. And I was like, hey, just call and check on Jesse. I'm in the area. And she got loud with me, talking about, I don't know why you keep calling me, blah, 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 Mr. Drake. Told you he's at school. I said, you have 5 minutes to locate him.
Wow.
5 minutes. That's it. You have 5 minutes to locate him. I need to call back. I need to see him immediately. Then I need to talk to you afterwards. And with that being said, I made a report. Unfortunately, with some caseworkers, I know I was one of them. I had to make a lot of emails, and I had to learn to what we call CYA. For the people who may not know, cover your ass. And I had to blind CC my program director about certain things, because come to find out, one of the kids was being, I think started having lesions on their skin and things of that nature, and that was able, with my information, and that information was able to shut down that foster home, that racket, you can call it. Like, but it happens. It happens more, especially. This is a different conversation for the future too, with children that have special needs and they're aging out of care. That's a whole different thing. I've never when I was able to see that part, I didn't even know how to even react, because it's not enough resources for people with needs, adult needs, when it transitioned into adult protective services.
Yeah. Well, and I mean, you talk about something that could be its own podcast. I may or may not eventually do a paper on this, but I've been researching for a long time and looking at a lot of numbers about these placements and the non-relative placements, and the consequences of some of these bad placements are, I don't even think we know how deeply these kids are affected. And as you could probably tell from visiting with me, I tend to focus a lot on drugs. And when you look at the prescription drugs that a lot of these kids are given, and how that correlates to their level of care, I remember, probably in 2017, I was able to take a lot of my numbers and export them into Excel files, and then make it where you couldn't see the kid's name, but it had a bunch of other data. And I showed it to Dr. Carl Hart, who at the time was the chair of the psychology department at Columbia. And he said 3 things stick out. Because I've never seen kids on doses like these. I've never seen kids on this many medications at the same time, some of which involve more than one medication to treat the same thing. And he said, the third observation was more of a question. Why are almost all of these kids on non-generic drugs? Like, how? And I looked into that, and I found out there's actually a state group, the commission, I guess, that decides what medication the state of Texas will pay for. And he's like, that nobody's really made an ADHD drug that's any better than what we had in the 70s, but they've figured out ways to make it more expensive. And so anyway, we started looking at all the data, and as you know, Brandon, that's another way to sort of guarantee get your levels up, or one of the consequences could be you're on more drugs. And we started to look at like the percentage of kids who were on these really hardcore psychotropic meds in relative placements versus non-relative placements, and the percentage of the kids who are on medication just seemed to plummet for grandma and grandpa. And we don't have any. There's nothing but speculation to try and figure out some of the reasons why. And look, there could be some correlations, because the kids who are the most trouble might be the ones who are most likely to be in an RTC or something, and that may skew the numbers. But I think a lot of it is just that it's very counter-instinctual for parent or grandparent to just dose a kid with a ton of drugs. Whereas, like, I would guess that even a well-meaning stranger might just go, well, it's what the doctor said to do. And, you know, whereas, like, I think, I mean, I could imagine just in my family, family go, no, we're not going to solve this problem by giving them a bunch of drugs.
Absolutely.
In one of my PMC cases, the mother showed up, and clearly she had a lot of issues, but she cared about her child who was in PMC. And what she cared about, he was drugged up all the time. Mm-hmm. And so I actually issued a subpoena, if you will, for the psychologist to show up, because then I appointed an ad litem who knew a lot about medication, who also said, this is unbelievable. This child is way over medicated, and dangerously so. I mean, some of these were indicated. And do you know that the therapist refused to show up? I said, you can testify by phone. She has a contract with CPS. And I do think that maybe has been fixed. I mean, I've talked to CPS. If you're going to do contracts with people, tell them that they need to be available to testify in court. But, you know, the mother, who, again, had her issues, but she is the one who just kept pushing. My son is drugged up. He's a druggie, but by pharmaceutical drugs, and then she was right. And but again, I'm sounding maybe overly harsh. I know the individuals that work for CPS care, but you know, the agency really had some serious problems. I hear it's getting better, but you know, one of those was, you know, all these the legislature required an annual review of the kid's medication. And I think the legislature, when they passed that bill, intended for the child to be examined. But what CPS did, they had somebody look at the medication and just sign off on it. So again, I'm not trying to be overly critical, because it's very difficult. They have a difficult job. I know that. But I do think there are some improvements happening, and there can be more. My only concern is that sometimes when the pendulum swings, it swings too much. You know, are there kids that should be removed, at least temporarily, with relatives, and a better, more humane way of telling the kids what's going on, who are not being removed right now temporarily? But of course, I don't know the answer to that question. I think we need to watch out, for that, to make sure that doesn't happen. But I just think there can be a whole different approach to this problem, that might be better for the kids. And we only need to be child-centered on everything we do, which Judge Schneider pointed out earlier.
Well, yeah, and imagine if you were the commissioner of CPS in any state. You're talking about the pendulum going back and forth. CPS gets beat up either way. If they're for removing kids, they shouldn't, and the death that happens when a child is returned home, and I mean, so they're going to get it from both ends, and so that's tough. And I think if I'm not a psychiatrist, and I might, if I was in a case, might not have any reason to question medication. It's not that like Judge Rynd said, there's some wonderful caseworkers, wonderful people at CPS, but they probably aren't qualified to act as prescribing psychiatrists. And one of the interesting ironies, and I've seen it over and over and over, and I'm sure y'all have, where you have kids who are removed because there are allegations that the parents are doing meth. Then the kids come into care and they get prescribed an amphetamine compound, like Adderall. And so the state is simultaneously punishing someone for using a substance that we know from research has an indistinguishable effect. There's actually research done at Columbia. Longtime meth users being put on Adderall in double-blind studies and not being able to tell the difference. And not just behaviorally, but even when you monitor their vitals and everything else, it's indistinguishable. And the irony of removing kids because this is in their system and then placing those same substances in the kids is just just the strangest irony to me.
I know. And just briefly, we lost Judge Rynd. Hopefully he jumps back in. You know, things come around. I was just going to point something out. Because I was thinking, like, my mentee, once again, I've been in his life since he was 11, since 2009. Mm-hmm. And I was like, Judge Rynd was the judge on this case. And the reason once again, my first time or second time meeting him, I realized I was taking him from a foster home, like, once again, brand new. Once again, when you're talking about caseworkers being ill-prepared, like, you're literally just thrown into this, okay?
Sure.
I mean, you get out of that 3 months of training is nothing. It gives you the A's and B's, but it don't give you anything else in the alphabet. Let me tell you that, okay? But I appreciated basic skill and development training because that's what sparked my passion for cultural diversity training and diversity, equity, and inclusion training as well. But when I was thrown into this work, it was like literally what they said when you graduated from training is like, welcome to hell. And I'm like, like, okay. Right. And I was just saying, for Judge Rynd, my first case was in your court. The kid I'm still a mentee with, it was a case, I say it if I change the name, but it was a case where a mother was selling substances. It was 3 boys, 1 girl, and the mother ran over the person who was trying to steal drugs from her and ran over in the car. And mother was something else. The mother was something different. My first case was my most difficult. I want to say she was my smartest and made it most difficult parent because she was extremely mischievous. She lied on paperwork, falsified information. She embarrassed the pure hell out of me in my first permanency conference because she came with falsified documents. And I was like, I've been doing everything. But once again, I had to be diligent. But she trained me to be the person I had to become. It was like, I double, triple check everything. I call people and kind of find out she had a warrant out for arrest. But the reason we're talking about is the substances, because with the 11-year-old at the time, because it was a 17-year-old, a 15-year-old, and 11-year-old, and the girl was, I think, 9. And before I was moving them to a placement, once again, I'm brand new, don't know anything, but when I was looking at this young man, he was when I first time I saw him, he was super talkative, okay? And then I was just sitting the second time, I had his medication. He was, no exaggeration, drooling. Wow. Mouth open. And I'm like, what? What the hell is this? And that was my first time experiencing something like that. Once again, we're going to have a panel with CPS caseworkers, and hopefully I can bring some leaders of CPS on as well. I want everybody's perspective, because me being a new CPS worker, I'm 22. This is my first job out of college. I'm like, what is this? I'm like, why is this happening? And when I was able to place him with a family member, and I had to, I'm glad everybody was in agreement with that. Even though the family was not the best, the family had some issues and some struggles along the way, but it was better than when he was at. And unfortunately, he had to come back in the care later, but we'll lead on that. Because the mother got out of prison and took the kids again. Wow. Yeah. So when we talk about even experiences, I've had 2 I can talk about in Judge Schneider's court, where one, it became a jury trial, had a very difficult father. And I'm like, his ideology, he was smarter than the system. His ideology, nobody's going to tell him what he's going to do and not do with his children. He wasn't abusing his children, but he was neglecting his children. His girlfriend was the one abusing the children. And he was like, legit, he said, I wasn't the one that did it, though. You're still with this woman, though. And we find out he's still with the woman. And we were going to place the kids with his sister. When we talk about the deep dive that Judge Schneider was talking about, we look for family member everywhere. We find a sister that lived less than a mile away from him, coincidentally, in Baytown. Now, these kids had some delays. I don't know if you remember these kids. I still got that picture on the phone. I remember coming to court with you before, because they was in PMC for some amount of time. The dad was an extreme racist and sexist, and the kids were placed with a black family. And I was so happy that these kids were shown love, and they loved this family. They was with this family for a long period of time until they had to be removed because, they didn't. The family never wanted to adopt, and I remember Judge Schneider kept trying to say talk them into it. I'm like, they told me no. I remember this so well, but I remember we was gonna place the kids with his sister. And I remember him said verbatim, and I couldn't do nothing about it because Josette Ledoux was the attorney ad litem on the case. Okay. And he told us, everybody, it was like at a visit or somewhere, he said, if you place my kids with my sister, we wasn't even going to terminate his rights. He said, I will kill her. And I was like, damn.
Wow.
And he thought he was going to get, he really thought he was going to get his kids back. He had 3 different attorneys. He'll fire, get a new one, and his rights are terminated. But these kids end up being in care for a long period of time. I mean, maybe another 2-3 years in permanency. And I remember to the point I moved on and started working as the recruitment, training, retention manager at Child Advocates. But I still kept in touch. I always kept in touch. And I remember those kids were finally adopted by a whole different family member that was able to step up and take care of them. They located on the side, where the mother side didn't want to have anything to do with them initially. And it's a lot of work. It's a lot of emotional work. Just being in child welfare from all different perspectives. I had another one, Judge Schneider, where the mother worked every single service. Every single service. She was like the ideal parent. She was low income. She was a small Latin or Mexican woman and nothing but maybe 5 foot tall. She worked her job. She used to walk to visit. The bus used to drop off and she walked another mile to go visit the kids. She never missed one visit, and she did everything she's going to do in the visit. And I remember the kids are placed in a very wealthy home in the Woodlands, very wealthy home. And they're nice family. Don't get me wrong, nice family, Caucasian family. Had a daughter of their own. Had all the kids had their own bed, and they used to use that. Hey, they have their own bedroom. They have a pool in the backyard. All these great amenities and things. But it rubbed me such a wrong way when they were approaching the mother in court before a CASA or a CPS worker got there and like, hey, how about you just sign over your rights to us, or just give your rights to state so we can adopt them, we can keep visit. Like, and when the mother came to me in tears, as this when I was at Child Advocates, and like telling me what happened, I'm like, you're lying. And I remember having to go to the judge and like, hey, this, she's doing, and she was doing everything she was supposed to be doing. And this was one of the cases that we did everything we were supposed to be doing, but it still didn't work out well. The kids were placed back with mom, because mom completed all her services. She did everything. A year and a half later, mom did the same damn thing that got them back in care again. Was on the news, everything. And that was my biggest fear. Always, my kids come back in care and I signed off or something. But I had to talk to my volunteer. We did it. She did everything she was supposed to do at that time. And we made a recommendation based off the facts. And we gave, I think everybody did the right thing, but we were able to place the kids back with their family. But it was one of them things that I was like, it's hard work. You're going to make some mistakes along the way. So I know even if you all as judges, and even if you get upset and you may go off on anyone, or we have to have grace for ourselves. We're not perfect. And something I will make sure to continue with every single one of these conversations is, the system is a people system, okay? And people are not perfect. So the system is never going to be perfect. But we have to continue to grow, evolve, make changes when we need to make changes, and learn from our mistakes. That's the way we can go by it. Because it's and I'm looking forward to, once again, more buy-in from, because even Roger, I didn't even think to contact Rogers Boudreaux. He's been perfect for this. Good. But yeah, so I know y'all. I don't want to take up too much of your time. Y'all have been so, and we still got to do the makings of y'all, the makings of you for each one of y'all. But what can you leave us this? What would you want to share with anybody that wants to get involved in child welfare from any level, and basically what changes you want to see in the system?
Oh man, could you narrow it down to, like, say somebody wants to be a child advocate, or somebody wants to be a caseworker, or an attorney, or I was gonna ask for each one, like, because I really want to know because it seemed like you all get it. That's the biggest thing about it. I've had some folks that it's like, because I'm not perfect. So if I want to become
an attorney, let's say an attorney at light on with CPS, what would you advise? What information do you have?
Well, one of the things that I think compared to, say, medical school, I think one of the ways in which law schools or that system sort of fails is you have a lot of folks who, like in any profession, they imagine themselves doing a certain thing, and then they get out and they see it, and it's not at all what they want to do. Whereas, like if you're a physician, by the time you've graduated, especially if you're lucky enough to do it in Houston, you've delivered babies, you've done all kinds of things in the real world. So I would suggest if you go to a law school that has a clinic, get into that and see if you like it or you don't. I'm lucky enough right now. I've got a fantastic intern thanks to David and Katya Dow from U of H Law School, and he's helping me on what's essentially a pro bono homicide juvenile case, and he's fantastic, and he knows exactly what this entails. I mean, that's more juvenile, not CPS, but he sees some that are in both systems. But there are a lot of people, just because of, say, a personality type deal, or that may have nothing to do with how much they love kids, just the actual job itself. You understand, like, the hours that it really takes to do it right. You understand that every weekend, if you're doing this out of Harris County, Texas, you're going to be in the car visiting your kids. If you're doing your job, you're going to be in court 5 days a week. You're going to be, that kind of stuff, regardless of how good their intent are, if they don't understand what it actually entails. Like, how would you describe, you've been a caseworker and a child advocate, I remember when CPS, they would just get paid once a month, and once a month they would turn in all their gas bills and everything. And, no matter how much you like kids and want to be a social worker, if you can't stand being on call 24/7, that's not the job for you.
And let me add something quickly too. And if you owe the college that you went to because you took out a transcript and they never informed you that you had a transcript and you owed $5, they will hold your full travel check. Like,
really?
That was when I say stress, I was not happy. Wow. I was so upset. I'm like, but instead of taking $5 out, they'll hold a good $1,100 out.
So do you have any?
Doesn't give you the money to pay the $5.
Right.
Makes it even more stressful.
Exactly.
Brandon, you've heard about. Oh, sorry. Go ahead.
I agree with Michael. You need to be able to recognize your weekends are not going to be your own, and you're going to be in court a lot. And it's often very stressful because sometimes the answers are not clear. You can put all your intelligence and all your good faith and hard work, but sometimes it's really difficult to make a recommendation, or it's difficult work. That, Brandon, from your work as a CPS caseworker, your work with child advocates, it's hard, and part of it is you're dealing with people, and people are not perfect, and often in very stressful situations. So that, I think, is very important. So I agree with Judge Schneider. If you have a chance to do an internship, get your feet wet, do something so you can really see what it's like. And the system is not perfect. So you're going to get frustrated by the delays, by the imperfect results. And that's just, so my advice is go in with your eyes wide open. Try not to lose your commitment and your enthusiasm. Always remember, the interest of the child comes first, although that's often what's hard. What is best for the child?
Yes.
So if that's your goal, it's often hard to ascertain that. And so that would be my recommendation, is that just I can do it for the money, that kind of thing.
That makes me think of, I really love jury trials. I think it's one of the things that we should be most proud of in our system, that especially now, I feel like jurors are even more open-minded than I remember them being 20 years ago. And but we talk about, I guess the way I took your question was, what would you tell different people who want to get into this? It really always struck me when nobody hardly, when they come down to be a juror, imagines that they're going to be on a CPS case, or they don't even many of them don't even know that whole system exists. And it made me think of that when Frank was talking about, the decisions can be so hard, and there's not always a right decision. And when you have a bunch of people, let's say a group of people who did not really volunteer to make a decision about an abused or neglected child, and they have to make a decision where there's going to be a loser no matter what. That's interesting to watch what happens when you have people who mean well and are put into the system and actually have to make decisions based on what little information they have, and with such gravity. Every single, even in the cases that you would think of as slam dunk, I always had jurors who expressed, "Whoa, I'm so glad I don't have to do this every day." And even in a case where you had a parent who clearly was not able at that time to parent, they always felt horrible about having to terminate a parent's rights if that's what they had to do. And I was always so impressed by how seriously they seemed to take it.
Wow. Well, I would say I love hearing that, because I'm the opposite. I am not a fan of jury trials, and when I was at Child Advocates, I think I held the most jury trials ever. I had just back to back, but they went well.
Did you feel like most of the time they they had a decent outcome? I mean,
yes, majority of them, absolutely. It was one that this case just closed. This case was open for 8-9 years. That it went to jury, and I know what court this is. But this might have been the 309. This is a court that really pushed it. They changed it where the judge can overturn jury, because it wasn't this is the only case I've seen a judge overturn the jury's decision, because the jury, when they made it during the debrief, said the reason why they wanted to place the children with the grandmother because they thought CPS and Child Advocates was going to stay on. We're like, no, we're done. We're done after this. And they're like, they're like, everybody, we did not know. We did not understand that. We thought y'all were going to continue to monitor. Because we were like, the grandmother was just as bad as the mother. It was a situation of that. And it was, they were like, made a decision. The judge, it was a lot that went into that. That was a hell of a case. And I know you had a question too, Judge Schneider. Do you recall it?
Just about if you thought, how you thought the outcome generally was with jurors, if they would tend to get it right, if they got the right information. Like for that jury, it sounds like they, but for not having been told what was really going on in the system, they probably wouldn't have made that decision. So, but generally,
it's always about education. It's all about education. Like for the one when I had in your court, I went down to usually the jury, was it deliberation? Is that what it's called when they make a decision?
Mm-hmm. Right, they deliberate.
Usually take maybe an hour, 2 hours, maybe a day. I went to the restroom, came back. People was passing me that, I was like, where everybody go? They're like, oh, we're done. They made the decision that fast. So I was like, what? I'm like, okay, well, we're in agreement with it. And even with that decision being made, and we didn't want it to go that way with the dad, but just seeing him cry, it was like, it's hard to see people that, even adults don't have their own best interests, and they don't have their own best interests of their children at time. They don't understand it's consequences for your actions or the actions you don't make. But I think that make the decision as far as I work with them. But I've been on juries on the other end too, and I am not the biggest fan of them. It's because we have, once again, living in the culture and the society we are now, it's kind of a praise that hey, mistakes happen. I do these conversations like we're having, but with the general public about, and you get the strong polar opposites come out. You have people should be where they can't have children, where inseminated anymore. They would where they can't no longer have children. They should have like a certain type of law or permit to have kids. You know, you have to make a certain, like, people legit say that. Do you have some that like CPS shouldn't get involved until the child is dead or has been severely hurt? I'm like, what about, but these are people, parents that are saying this. This is like, they have whole profiles and lives out and they're confident in what they're saying. So that's why I love having this conversation here so we can see all sides. Because it's good and bad and all, you know, and it's once again, but when you talk about the work, it's stressful, it's hurtful, but the system need a lot of tweaking and a lot of updating and a lot of adjusting. I remember even paying caseworkers more, because even Judge Rynd was getting on talk. I was getting paid $32,000 out of college. Once again, I was living with friends my first 2 months. I didn't have a bed frame until 6 months down the line. Then they holding my check back because of a transcript I didn't know about. Then I'm getting yelled and cursed out by everyone. You have high stress. You're making decisions. You have kids crying. You have parents. And I'm like, I am not getting paid enough for this.
Yeah, and your house wouldn't have even passed a home study.
And exactly, you know, a case in point, because we've had caseworkers that had kids, CPS involved in their life, and I've seen that happen, and it's like it's a cycle for what it's causing a caseworker to be unsuccessful. Well, I remember saying that I had around 80 people that graduated me in basic skills and development training. Within 3 months, it was down to 30.
Wow.
That's how many people left.
Okay, actually, that was a question I was going to start to ask a few minutes ago. The huge exodus of CPS workers. I think it's unprecedented this year. What's your take on that?
One, I didn't know about it. Two, I'm not surprised. We just coming out of a pandemic. I knew when the pandemic started. I was in Seattle, but I knew in pandemic I was calling some of my coworkers. I like, it's about to get real ugly. Because we all know, unfortunately, when, just like with a lot of divorces, when families are meant to be together and they're stuck together, unfortunately, children are abused. Usually a lot of reports come in when kids go back to school or over the summertime when abuse and neglect happens. And I don't know how much caseworkers are getting paid now. We're going to find out in the upcoming episode. But once again, this type of work is, I don't know if y'all know this, but I did repo while I was in college. I worked at Rynd Center. All right. When I used to knock on doors in Third Ward and Dead End and out deep in the country and things of that nature with Confederate flags and things, I used to get guns pointed in my face directly to me. I'd rather do repo than do CPS again.
Really?
That's how bad. I mean, when I started going to therapy because of my job. That's how
because of the repo job.
No, because of CPS
job.
CPS,
wow.
Like CPS stressed me out that much as a caseworker, because I'm fighting it. I'm fighting everybody. and I remember I had a county attorney, which was supposed to be my attorney, legit said it was some paperwork. What is it called when you have to do a diligent search? I forgot what the code name that you got to enter to locate the missing father. And you have so much going on. No matter how organized you think is, I have this, and they just throw all these cases at you, especially you have transfer cases, which are pure hell. But the thing is, it was like I saw my supervisor did not support kids, did not support me. I saw him throw me on the completely lie, and I'm glad I blocked CYA and my program step up. And then when I saw a county attorney say I didn't do a paperwork, and we're going through the discovery, and she flipped the page and she flipped it fast, and I'm like, stop. That's it right there. I did give it to you. Then she flipped it again. It popped up a second time. I turned it another one like 2 months later because I was court ordered to do so. And I was like, really? I was like, F it. I'm like, it was like, it made me to who I am now, to be prepared. I'm in HR now, and I make sure to check certain policies and procedures and make sure to be kind. And the reason why I got into HR, because the caseworkers needed better support. as a CPS caseworker, as doing your work, you do not have enough support. It would drive you crazy. I used to walk by and I used to see CPS caseworkers breaking down, crying at their desk. I mean, not anything's going on personally in their home, but because then you see red case files. That it's not normal to see that type of, the abuse and neglect. Then when these kids open up to you, and I'm a big person speaking about secondary post-traumatic stress, it affects you just reading that case file. People send me all the time, you should watch this movie, read this book. Do you know the work that I can write a book myself, and I'm talking about because oh my goodness, one of the kids, I've had a kid commit suicide, and I remember talking to him. But it's not on record that he committed suicide, but damn it, we're not stupid, But I remember talking to him. He came into care because his mother would not stop abusing drugs. She never abused him, never hurt him. But he was sexually molested by a foster parent right before I became his child advocate, okay? Like a few months later. Well, a few months before. And he came from a family group of 11 children. He was 15, 16 at that age. And when I would, visit my kids, my teenagers, I used to call them every Friday. I may not see you every week, but really as the CASA supervisor, I was supposed to see you every 3 months. But I know as a black male figure, I'm gonna keep a relationship with you. And I remember I'm going to see him one month, and he told me, you know what, CPS failed me. And but coming from him, because he was a very quiet kid, but to open up like that, I would never forget. But he CPS failed me. My mama never hurt me. My mama didn't do anything to me, But I was molested. I've been in before I became his CASA supervisor, he was in 8 different placements, and throughout the time I was with him, he was in another maybe 8. He said, I don't feel like they didn't do what they were supposed to do. And I've had some kids. I had more kids be unsuccessful than successful. I would say that. And not saying if they would have been to the parents, it would have been better or worse. But I'm an empath, and I take that serious. Like that's something that is hard to see. And that's why I say doing that work is a lot. I try to train people that have the capacity to do it and continue to go out and make these changes, because we all got so much we can do before we burn out. So, yeah. I mean, that's a long answer.
Yeah, but it's tragic not just because of what happens to those kids, but it's disturbing to me, having known you for a long time, that you're the kind of person who should be a regional director or a commissioner of CPS, not somebody who's driven out. I mean, because when you have people who are smart, empathetic, they're not going to make it in a system, working in a system like that. Mm-hmm. That's not who becomes the program directors or the program administrators or you know what I mean?
And I know, because that's what was told. That's what I saw. You check the boxes, and you see it, and me being young, seeing that, it once again, it molded me to be in more spaces. Like the organization I'm with now, I'm in the food justice hunger solution. I basically work with the Houston Food Bank, and we work with people that actually care about the mission. And that's the thing. CPS has the mission, but do they have people who care about it in total? That's the struggle. That's the struggle. And I hopefully this is reaching people and that's what this is, to reach people to say, hey, because if we tear down CPS, get rid of the system, what do we have? What will we do?
It's a good question.
Because even with with your the case that recently with I'm assuming that was a case aide that told that child to get into prostitution. I said, I think I even know that case aide. I think that's my former case aide. When I was like, just even though the face blurred out, that didn't surprise me, unfortunately.
Yeah, and that's a sad story, and really, not just because that individual did that, but the fact that you have so many of these CWAP kids now, and
what does CWAP stand for?
Children Without Placement. So you remember a few years ago, there were at times as many as about 400 kids statewide who were in, they were staying in the CPS offices, and then Judge Jack got onto them. And for your listeners, Judge Jack is the federal judge who's been overseeing the CPS system for, at least 10, 11 years. Yeah, and then when that, after her criticism, they were moving them out of the offices, but moving them into hotels and not in the greatest neighborhoods. My understanding is this happened at a hotel in Southwest Houston, which is a bad neighborhood to be in.
Right off Bissonnette. If you know Houston, we know what's going on there. And that woman meant that. That's the thing. That woman.
Absolutely. And I've I've worked with that mom for a long time, and she's told me that the other girls were engaged in prostitution because who's watching them? They basically would have, 6 or 8 hour shifts where there was somebody there. Mom had to bring food and clothes to the hotel. I said, what would they eat? And she was like, well, there was no stove or anything, so everything was microwavable or in a can. And in that video, if you remember, she's essentially saying, what's my incentive to give you food?
Mm-hmm.
Wow.
Yeah.
By the way, you'd mentioned the TikTok thing. I got an email the other day with a message of, potential new client, and we always have a little form, source of referral, and the person put TikTok. And I went on TikTok and I put my name in there in CPS, and there's all these more videos that I could count, and then there's an account with my picture and a bunch of videos, but it's not me.
You might want to get a hold of that quick.
But that was crazy, and it was not just this one. It was the sanctions against CPS a few years ago and all this other stuff, and I was like. Yeah,
social media has power, and we just got to make sure to utilize it in the best way. I try to use it for good, and when how many times people sent me that video because they look at me, oh Drake, you got to look at this, you got to speak about this. I this is the person I've been trying to have on the show for about having a future, and and I said whatever he's saying, support it because he cares, But it's one of social media is a lot, and I want to make sure people are being well informed, and that's why I try to be patient. It's hard because, once again, the hardest thing me doing is trying to get the biological parents that had kids in care. If y'all know anyone, let me know. I've had some that we did their makings of you, their one-on-one, got to know them, and I can see the hurt that they've had in life, and usually it's that cycle. They were abused. They were heavily neglected, talked down to, and they did it to a child. I've been threatened. Well, I've been doxxed. Somebody put my personal information online because I had to address them like they were live in effect abusing their child online.
Wow.
And they've been on my show, and I'm like, hell no. I do not just talk about this. Is something I live by. I'm in tune with this work, but. So
are you saying, are you looking for parents who have kids to come on in the system to come on? Is that what you're looking for?
Correct.
I've got some clients who would love to tell their story, and in a constructive way.
And that's the thing. I needed that constructive way because I've had some that it's like.
Yeah, it's just hatred or what, or bitterness I think that's great. And, I'm meaning to say this since we started, you were talking about you're going to be doing a series of podcasts with, different people in the system, your judges and attorneys and whatever. You've probably already thought of this, but I think it would be so cool after you've done that to have like a panel podcast where people are criticizing each other. See?
And we're right here, and that's what we're right there, and that right there. And once again, this is something I prayed over before I even started putting it together. And I'm also one of those that I want it to be genuine and casual, just like we're having right now. Everything we've said here, it hasn't been pre-discussed, anything of that nature. we just came on and we just start sharing our experiences. Okay. And I already know, like, I've cried on some of my previous episodes, like just the discussions one-on-one with people. I was telling Judge Schneider, Judge Rynd, that I've been doxxed. I've had, because I'm trying to locate parents, breaking that cycle so hard. And I just hopefully, once again, I'm hoping and I'm praying, I think we were going to reach some people that may need to hear all of our perspectives. And even with CPS, hearing from other caseworkers. We have a pretty good lineup of people from even different states to talk about the work that they're doing. I've had some kids that have aged out of care, some that are active and they started their own nonprofits, and I've had some that are still learning throughout their process as well. And one I'm trying to do with service providers too, because people need to understand what these things look like, provide services, and how do we continue to provide resources to have these families and these children be successful.
So, a couple things. I mean, first of all, thank you for doing this.
Thank you.
I know there is a hunger for this kind of material about CPS stuff. I get calls literally from across the country every week, and there's so many people who want to have this kind of information, people who want people to come together and share ideas. But number two, it's like, on a million times I've given, sound bites to newspapers and TV and all that. And to be able to do a long form conversation, it's just a completely different deal. Even, I loved, and I know Judge Rynd did too, being a commissioner on the Supreme Court of Texas Children's Commission.
Right.
So great. I love to hear when we would get together, sort of everybody's on the commission's 5 or 10 or even 15 minutes of sharing what they've been doing since our last meeting. But even then, it's not as long form as something like this, and there's not really as much of a back and forth. So this is a great format too. So thank you for doing this.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. And again, if I can do something in the future, let me know. Okay.
I sure will.
Okay.
So, for our listeners, to our viewers, and once again, this will be on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, to YouTube, and little snippets here and there through our social medias. If the people are looking for you and you're trying to be found, where can the people find you?
If you Google my name and CPS, you'll no shortage of
And I, on the other hand, am older, not as social media oriented. But I think if you Google me, it'll show up. But I work full time for an employer, and I'm really not allowed to take other cases or anything like that because they've got me full time, where I'm working now. And I'm going to be 71 soon, but I'm still working. So until I can leave, I can't take other cases or talk to people about other things.
But you still get to do good things for kids and families in your job. So
and hopefully with the job and that sort of stuff too. So I'm on the board of CASA. Child Advocates in Houston. I'm still on their board. Then also on the board of Santa Maria Hostel, which provides the only really rehab services for mothers with their children. And so there's not that separation, and hopefully some degree of success on overcoming the drug and alcohol problem, as well as they offer parenting classes and just a real chance for a woman to change her life or turn her life around, maybe get out of an abusive relationship and that sort of thing. So those are my two avocations, I guess you'd say.
And the Santa Maria thing, I mean, you talk about something where you get a vibe of people running it who get it, who really understand it, and also are like, let's put it together. Let's make something good happen. I mean, it's just, they're so distinct from so many other entities. So, yeah, very cool.
I'm going to have to reach out to some folks at the Santa Maria to have that conversation. To have them on as well.
I think it'd be great if you got some people from there. Because they can give you a real insight, I think. I really do. I mean, they're
All right.
with their people. So, all right. Well, thank you. Oops.
No.
Somehow my phone. Okay. See you later.
Just like that.
Thanks for having us.
Okay.
Take care.
Bye-bye. Thanks.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
Hello, beautiful people. Thank you all so much for listening to Season 4, Episode 6 with our child welfare series on everything culture. We want to say thank you again, and thank you for our guests, Judge Rynd and Mike Schneider. We look forward to seeing y'all next week with our next episode, which would be more of a lesson form conversation about child welfare and what is child abuse and neglect. What does it look like, and how does it affect families as well as the children? And as always, if you can like, share, and support with a comment and a review, we would greatly appreciate that. These are all great ways to support Everything Culture. And we look forward to seeing you this Sunday, 1 p.m. to 3 p.m. Pacific Standard Time for our Everything Culture Happy Hour with our community members. Thank you all so much. God bless. Peace.